bringing you Grassroots Matters interviews with our host, Sally from Grassland Nutrition, and special guests and collaborators on the topic of nutrition, and more. All right, let's dive headfirst into this episode.
Welcome to today's podcast. Here, we talk to Olaf Sorensen, a strength trainer and Circadian health ambassador. Olaf is the youngest son of co-founders of Grassland Nutrition, and he shares his journey into strength training, self-experimentation with nutrition, and touches on his influences with Grassland Nutrition's mission and vision. We'll also dive into his circadian health practices and how light specifically has become a key part of his approach. This is a short conversation and includes direction for building true strength and living a vibrant, purpose-driven life. All references Olaf mentions will be included in our show notes. Thanks for joining. Hi, Olaf. Thanks for joining me today. Olaf has kindly agreed to come and chat to us for the Grassroots Matter podcast. Olaf is a strength trainer by profession, a decentralized health ambassador, and he's the youngest son of co-founders of Grassland Nutrition. I'd love to share his story with you in his own words. And so, Olaf, thank you.
My pleasure, Sally.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your 30-minute strength training offering and how that works, how you work with your clients?
Okay, so it's basically people come once a week for, as you said, about 30 minutes, and they do quite a hard workout, and that is really enough to maintain and build your strength. So it's all based on, probably the pioneer of it was Doug McGuff, which some people might be familiar with, who wrote a book called Body by Science. And it's basically what the workout looks like. It's about 5 or 6 exercises, works the whole body. We do what we call one set to muscular fatigue. So in a nutshell, again, it's kind of based on what you call the Henneman size principle, that in any given muscle we have different types of fibers. People might be familiar with slow twitch and fast twitch. They don't actually refer to how quick the muscle fibers contract, but rather how quick they fatigue. So your slow twitch, which is your smaller fibers, when you're just lifting something light, you're just engaging your smaller fibers because there's not a lot of resistance. As you add resistance to that muscle, then you have to produce more force, obviously, and that's when your body then starts recruiting your medium and big fibers. So what we do is we say one set to fatigue of, say, the leg press, and that will take about anywhere between 90 seconds and 2.5 minutes. And we work in a slow, continuous fashion with a significant weight that gradually fatigues all the fibers from small or slow twitch up to your fast twitch. So basically, you start out working slow, and then it gets harder because the muscle fibers are fatiguing, and then when you can't move the weight, that's basically when the set's over, and we move on to the next exercise. I hope that's clear enough.
That is really nice and clear and very, very precise. Yeah. How did you come to set up your strength training business? What happened in the lead up to that made you think, this is for me? I found my calling.
Well, it's a little bit of background on how I came to discover Doug McGuff. I was, if we go back probably about 10 to 12 years now, I was very much into long distance running. My grandfather was a marathon runner. He was in the 52 Olympics, so running was very much in our family. He was one of the first people in Denmark, where we're from originally, to start what we call interval training. At that time, marathon runners were mainly going out run long and slow because that's what a marathon was, you know. So, but he basically started doing a lot of sprints, you know, a lot of intervals of, you know, maybe 1,000 meters intervals of faster pace, or 5,000 or 400s. People sort of be familiar with that type of, you run a heat, say 1,000 meters, you have a bit of a rest, and you run again. And anyway, it brought him to the Olympics. Mm-hmm. But it was also that he put in a lot of work. And we sort of grew up with, well, if you're not getting the results, you put in more work. You do it harder, you double down.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I've seen some of his old training programs, and he was doing a lot. So that's sort of what I was into, ultra distance running at the time, up to like double marathons. And so yeah, my biggest training week ever, I think, was 150 kilometers, basically half a marathon a day, because, you know, I wanted to get good at this. But I was also looking into how could I optimize my diet. So I was doing a deep dive into that. But when it came to how the body actually worked, I didn't really have a lot of knowledge. I knew the basics, I thought. And I came across Doug McGuff. I basically Googled body chemistry on YouTube, and he came up with a 2-hour talk. And when I finished that, I thought, well, either he's right or I'm wrong at my approach to exercise, and I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah, okay.
So,
very black and white.
And so pretty much I stopped. I think it might even been that week at 150 kilometers. I pretty much stopped running, and then the next day I went and did one of his workouts, which took about 15 minutes.
Yep. And
the interesting that happened, just body composition wise, was that over the next 4 years I proceeded to lose about 4 kilos of body fat. Now you couldn't really see it, and I was fairly fit, as you can fit looking.
Yep.
And fairly lean. So, but what I then started to read into things, that I was actually, I was overstressing my body. And that can actually have a detrimental effect to where you start to hang on to body fats, especially internal body fat around your organs. This is my theory of what happened. So yeah, a lot less exercise and fat loss, and so that was kind of how I came to, well, what is exercise? It's a stress on the body. The magic actually happens when you're resting, recovering, sleeping.
Sure.
That's when your body makes the changes, not in the moment. But that was kind of a bit of a revelation, because I thought, I'm out there pounding the pavement and I'm getting fitter with each step. No, it doesn't work like that. So yeah, then I just basically continued to do the workout myself, and for the next 5, 6, 7 years, and that's when I thought, you know what, I think I could teach people this. I think I could show them how to do this. I feel like I got my head wrapped around it, obviously watching everything there was with Doug McGuff and others on YouTube, reading what books I could, a little bit touching up on anatomy and biochemistry and that sort of thing. And yeah, then I opened my gym about 6 years ago, and now I've sort of got a full book. I've got a waiting list. I see about 45 to 50 clients a week, and my longest client's been with me about 4 years. So I work with professionals like a doctor's surgery. There's a chiropractor that comes to me, refers people to me. He comes himself. The doctors come themselves. So yeah, it's just a really good place to be in, really.
Fantastic. What a community.
Yeah.
Everyone's like
Call ourselves a bit of a cult, actually.
And your mascot is?
It's a rhino. Yeah. I haven't got one here to show you. But yeah, the rhino sort of came out. People always ask, what's with the rhino? Well, it's there's an interview I heard with Doug McGuff, and he he was trying to explain in the context of being a trainer the difference between people. As we know, we're all different. And because it's a very hard workout and it's stress, and people react to that stress differently. So he said, well, at one end of the scale we have, it's like dragging a mad horse through a burning barn. Yeah, that's how difficult it can be to get a client through. And then you have everything in between, up to what you call an intensity animal, where they will just want to go and see the white rhino. So I think that refers to you're so hallucinated when you're at high fatigue that you start to see things. And the only thing I could look up on the white rhino was that it's actually a marijuana plant. So it goes pretty well with hallucinating. So anyway, that became the symbols, kind of working hard.
You've got to go deep. Yeah, you've got to harness that. Deep. That inner white rhino.
Go and see the rhinos.
Yeah, beautiful. I absolutely love it. And just tying in with that, I know that you've done quite a lot of experimentation with kind of nutrition, your diet, your intake, and measuring your food and your intake, and taking lots of photos over time. And I know that has kind of evolved over time in terms of what you do now, both for your strength training yourself and also how you're fueling your body. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that kind of ties into Grassland Nutrition?
Yeah, so basically when I was running, I discovered the low carb diet. And I had never, up until that point, I sort of grew up with eating basic food. We had a garden and that sort of thing, and so I always thought, well, it's just building blocks and energy. You know, and doesn't matter where it comes from too much. Better if it comes from whole food. Sort of had that concept, but not too much. But then I discovered, I believe it was Dominic D'Agostino, some people might have heard of as well, a researcher in Florida, talking about these ketones and being in ketosis, and it was like, what in the world is this about? So then took a deep dive into that. Cut a long story short, it was low carb was kind of taking off about that time. Well, there's getting, there's a few books written, and so I thought, wow, like it actually you run on basically fat or carbohydrate the way I understood it, and you can only store so much carbohydrate in your muscles, in your body, so when you run out, you bonk, as they say. But if you can run on a fat fuel source, even a lean person has a lot there, and you can basically run forever. So that was ideal for long distance running. So I changed my diet, and I radically improved. I can remember having the bonks even on training runs where I'd have to sit down and walk home. One time I even got a lift home. But when I went low carb, it was, I always describe it like the stomach could be rumbling, but you felt fine. Brain was fine, everything was good. So you were just running on this. So then I basically didn't look back and just, went low carb. Later on, I started hearing, probably 5-6 years ago, started hearing about these people that just didn't eat vegetables or any carbs at all. And just ate meat. I thought, that sounds a bit ridiculous, but it kept sort of growing. There was more and more things coming out about it. I thought, I'm going to try this, and I did a 1-month experiment, just meat, salt and water, coffee in the morning, but that was it. And
diligently for a whole month.
Yeah, and I can't say I felt that much better, but I felt just as good. And I didn't really miss the vegetables, plus the time cooking them and everything. So then I just never went back. Not 100%. I would have a bit of fruit in season, and if I was out to dinner, I might have whatever was on the plate. But generally, I was just happy doing that. And that's pretty much how it stayed to this day. Now I'm learning a lot more about, so as you know, the quantum biology side of things, about how important light is,
Yeah.
and actually what food is. I thought I knew about it when it was fat and carbohydrates and proteins, but actually a whole other story now. So basically eating local for the reasons that you want your food grown in the same light as you're in, and the same season that you're in, the same time you're in. Getting a lot more sunlight, and really feeling even better than I was.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, you want to extrapolate on the Grassland Nutrition, how that came in?
Yeah. I'd like to know a little bit more about, I mean, obviously your parents were kind of influenced and interested in your journey with both health, the business that you were starting to get yourself into, and how you were eating for health. And I know that your parents have always been on that similar kind of trajectory.
Yeah.
Olaf's father had debilitating migraines that would take him out probably for about 2 or 3 days every 10 days for many, many years. And so his journey is slightly different, but I think it converged at the inception of Grassland and in the making of Grassland. And can you talk to me about how influential kind of you were there, and how you worked with your parents in the setting up of Grassland?
Yeah, well, I think the turning point for my parents was that when I went low carb and I was overseas at the time, I told them about, oh, you definitely got to eat this way and you got to cut out sugars, and they pretty much did. And as you said, my dad's migraine his whole life cleared up, so that was a real wake-up call. Then a few years later they retired. They were beef farmers, and looking for the next venture.
Yep.
We grew up with eating a lot of liver back in Denmark. Like liver pate is just like common fare, or even fried liver. And they actually had no idea to make liver pate, and they did for a while, sold the farmers market, but it was a harder business to scale up from just the kitchen into more industrial to make it a full-time venture. So that was a little bit out of reach for the investment required and time and everything else. So then they thought, well, what can we do just with the liver? I wonder whether you could dry that. And I think there was maybe one like a freeze-dried or dried powder or jerky type thing on the market at the time. But anyway, long story short, they worked out that freeze-drying was the best way to preserve the nutrients without having to use heat to dry the liver.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's sort of how it started out and came about. So, but it was with that interest in, we'd always grown up with it, and the more we knew about the nutrients in it, especially B12, which then we were told that a lot of people lack B12. So then it was, okay, well, let's try and make a product. But I really got to give them credit. I know I'm involved, but it's really them that do the hard lifting day to day.
Yeah, awesome. And there are now 22 products, and they include, many of them include kelp for the essential iodine as well, which is tremendous. And there's new product development underway for something completely different. Again, a nutrient that many of us are missing. So that's really great. And there's been product on the shelf since 2017. So we're pretty established now, mostly in the US market, but also around the world. And we're making headway locally here in Australia too. Now, Olaf, I want you to please just explore with me where the light piece came in to your approach to optimal health.
Well, I've always enjoyed the sun and got a tan every summer, and so I was never just felt good being in the sun. But about 12 months ago, a bit over, I went to the doctor, I had a blood test, everything was fine except my inflammation markers were up. And I don't really take too much stock in blood tests these days because I look at things differently now, but I was a bit curious, and it's like that's never been up in all the years of a blood test. It's always been 0. C-reactive protein, I think it is. So, and I had just come onto my radars, Jack Cruz, which people might be familiar with, who's sort of the godfather of all this stuff. But I thought about my lifestyle, and there would be days where I basically wouldn't be outside. Now, I had an outside job in the morning. I was riding racehorses from 4:30 in the morning till 9. But the first couple of hours, especially in winter time, that would be under floodlights, so under artificial light in the dark. Then I'd come home, and then I'd train clients all day. Or I'd be on my computer preparing sessions for the clients, and that'd also be inside. So the next time I stepped out the door was the next day at 4:30 when it was dark. Yeah. And I would go to the beach. I live right near the beach when I had time. But when things got busy, I realised there was like days through the week that I said it was out the door in the dark and out the next morning in the door when it's dark. And also spending a lot of time on the computer, which I now know is probably the worst light you can get through your eyes. So I did a complete U-turn, and now I sit outside on my computer. I have a little shade thing so the computer doesn't overheat. I'm usually out there at sunrise. The magic light is that morning light. And I train clients inside still, but all the windows are open. I've changed all my light bulbs to a non-blue blue light. So yeah, a lot more time outside. I wear my blue blocking glasses at night. I still sit with my laptop, even though that's the worst thing you can do on your lap, to get a lot of non-native EMF, basically bad electricity. So I now bought a X-ray blanket which blocks everything, so I have that between me and my laptop. So yeah, but it's really, I think it's a gradual change. Physically I probably feel about the same, not as fatigued. I was really struggling at one point when the weeks were getting long with the early mornings and late finishes, but I was putting that down to just long busy days. But after I've been doing this for 12 months, I've quit the riding, so that helps, not getting up early, but also not being in that artificial light for 2 hours when you shouldn't be receiving that at all. Being outside, I probably spend 15-20 hours on my computer, so compared to spending those 15-20 hours inside, they're now outside. Even if it's raining, I'll just sit under shelter so I'm still getting the light. And I just think this gradual change over a year's time, especially my sleep, is just out of this world compared to what it was.
So you get up before sunrise and you jump into the sea. You're in a privileged position to be able to run down to the beach within about 2 minutes.
Yep.
And launch yourself into the waves in the dark. Yeah.
Well, I try to. First client walks through the door at 8, and I like to get some sun before that. Depending on the season, I can get 1 or 2 hours. So, yeah, I try to get up and go for a swim for about 20 minutes all year round, and that's more for the cold exposure. Sure. and also the grounding, which I'm learning more about all the time. And that starts my day off, and then I get home and I'm hopefully on my computer sitting staring at the sunset by the time the sun comes up.
Eating your breakfast.
Eating my breakfast, yes, which
within the first hour of waking.
Something like that. Well, it's not, but it's as soon as I can. Sure. And that's another thing I've kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah.
as soon as you eat, that tells your body what time of day it is. So I'm still learning about all this stuff, but I just always look at things when something new comes along. Well, it's probably not going to kill me if I eat breakfast instead of skipping breakfast. Yeah, it's just a change. Because when you're sort of in the low carb realm, you hear you people say, "Oh, I always skip breakfast because I'm not hungry," and I used to do that as well, and just eat when I get hungry. That could be dinner time, or it might be lunchtime, depending. So you back then I was more or less having a bigger evening meal, and then maybe nothing through the day or only a little bit. But I've tried to really consciously change that. So I have quite a big, actually. Well, you inspired that breakfast. It's yogurt with the freeze-dried suet we have, a little bit of honey, which I know is sacrilege to low carbers, and quite a bit of kelp, and that sort of sustains me either all day, or if I get hungry again, then somewhere about mid-morning I might have a little protein meal with some local fruit. The local fruit, adding that back in, so it's been very recent again, but I have a good supply of organic homegrown oranges, and so I have that, and that's pretty much it. And then I try to have a fairly small dinner, relatively small. I try to eat so, okay, I want to be hungry in the morning, but maybe it's all added up to better sleep. So it's still constant tweaking and experimentation.
Thank you. You've mentioned Doug McGov a couple of times there as the kind of pivotal, maybe, person that's influenced you in starting up your strength training business. Can you talk to me about one or two other big influential people that have helped you shape where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, Doug McGuff has certainly been the main one. I could do a few other name drops there. There's a personal trainer called Skylar Tanner in the States as well. Basically, it's interviews with these guys sharing their experience, and that was a fairly new thing up until that was probably also about 6-7 years ago that started up. And so you basically get first-hand knowledge from these guys. And there's another guy called Drew Bay. These guys are fairly up there on the internet, easy to find. So yeah, in that realm, they were probably the guys there. And then the podcast I'm referring to the most is called High Intensity Business, run by a guy called Lawrence Neal in Ireland. But he also interviews a lot of exercise scientists. So yeah, just that abundance of information, it's all been inspiring. As far as on the diet and learning about your body, well, as I mentioned, Dominic D'Agostino early on. And he was kind of, and I think still is, probably the world expert sort of on ketone and ketosis, but obviously have a broad knowledge about how the body works. Thomas Seyfried, we've done a lot of cancer research and experimentation with cancer and ketosis. And then lately, the last 12 months, Jack Kruse came on the radar, and then that's just a whole different new rabbit hole. As you know, we've been to 2 conferences in Victoria with Max Gillane.
Yeah, the Regenerate Health,
Australian
Summit.
doctor.
Yeah.
And I've been following his work, and he's one of the really good podcasts I listened to was him and Jack Kruse, which is like 6 hours all up, I think, done in 3 parts. And have to mention Cameron as well. Cameron Borg, Richie Flow Nutrition podcast, puts out a lot of good information. I just find it such a privilege to be able to listen to all these scientists around the world that have been there forever. Some of them have looked into this stuff forever, and now you can hear a direct interview with them. and get their knowledge, buy their books. So yeah, I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for the internet and people putting this stuff out there.
And you mentioned Jack Kruse there, and I'm listening to Danny Jones interview Jack, and there's so many poignant and pivotal moments within that podcast that I'll be going back and re-listening to. But Jack mentions your all-time number one philosopher, Ayn Rand. Yep.
Yes.
Your philosophy for life too.
Yeah.
I'm not putting words in your mouth.
No, you're entirely correct. But basically this idea, without making too complicated, that we're meant to produce something of value, whatever that is, whether you work or whatever else. And we're happiest when we produce something of value. Yeah, so to each person, that we obviously all have to work in some capacity, or be in a husband and wife situation with kids. Well, then it's more sometimes division in labour, where one partner stays home raising the kids. But that again, you're producing value in the form of raising your kids, running but I really took that on. I always felt like I didn't think I was lazy, but I sort of wanted to not work hard. I wanted to, I believe somewhere there was a smart person inside, so I dabbled in a lot of things, but I was always trying to find, that thing so I could sort of semi-retire and just do what I wanted. But I actually always enjoyed really working hard trying to find that out. And then when the personal training came along, and even when I was riding, it was long days, but I was actually, even though sometimes you're really stretched, you had a long day and you wish there was maybe a little bit less to do, nevertheless, at the end of the day, you're so satisfied with how you feel from having been productive.
Yeah.
Providing you're engaged in something you believe in, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now it feels like I've hit the pinnacle a little bit. Look, I won't lie, they're sometimes 60, 70-hour weeks, but I don't really look at it as work. It's just what I get up and do. And sometimes, yes, I'll be honest, oh man, I wish I could take a day off today. But you can't. But I believe that kind of little bit being under pressure too is also what makes us. So
we need those uncomfortable days.
Yeah, I just think happiness is maybe not exactly what we thought it's probably not what we think it is. It's not this thing, I've got all the money in the bank, I've got unlimited time, and I can get up and do whatever I like. Well, I think
where's the sense of purpose there?
What's your sense of purpose? And it's a bit like, I think that's why Elon Musk hasn't retired. Why is he, or pick your person, because it doesn't satisfy someone like Elon. But it's kind of like there's two sides to you can't have one without the other. You can't have that happiness without also being pushed a little bit, because that's kind of what makes you happy. Yeah, going through a long day that's a little bit challenging, this idea of actually working hard in some way, being a little bit under pressure, is actually happiness. Yeah, it doesn't always feel like happiness when you're gonna get up and you got a longer day ahead and you're tired. But deep down, I think that's what seems to work for me.
Yeah, and I can relate to that.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Do you have any questions for me? Have I not covered something?
I think well, maybe just going back on the Grassland Nutrition side of when we started out.
Sure.
I don't know if you know, but I'm sort of employed as the grassland guinea pig. I don't know if you knew that was my job title.
The rouseabout?
No,
that's me. Sorry.
I've been the product tester, because I tend to overdo things, So when we first, I think the first product we made, we had some liver freeze-dried, but then it couldn't be milled for whatever reason fine enough. So we had bags and bags of this stuff, and I would just eat that much of it.
You overdid it.
Oh yes, and I have pictures of, and I've been doing that forever, and even now I probably eat a bit more than most but all I'm saying is that if anybody should have overdosed on getting toxic from eating too much liver or heart or kidney, it should be me.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, the kelp is an interesting story with the kelp. I don't know whether they're correlated, but as you know, I eat a lot of kelp with pretty much every meal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also when you're mainly eating meat, you do like that crunch. But I've always been a point I want to get to. I've always been a big salt eater, as you know. And in the last few months, that's completely gone. Now, kelp is a little bit salty, but I was still having salt with the kelp, and just gradually that has gone away, and that really surprised me. So, that's obviously, I'm biased when it comes to the products, but that's just kind of a little bit of a personal observation that I don't think there's any risk of overdosing, otherwise I'd be the one to have overdosed.
And do you remember when you were last sick? To the point that, and when I say sick, I just mean, feeling off, not able to work, not being able to get out of bed and service your clients for like a day or two.
Well,
do you remember?
I can honestly say it hasn't happened in 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, except when I fell off a horse and, got injured. But as far as having to take a sick day, no, not ever since I opened the business, no. I think I've cancelled 1 or 2 sessions here and there. I had a bit of a bout of something through winter. For about a week I was under the weather, but not bad enough to actually having to stop work. So I'll clearly admit it was a tough week. But no, in general, it's amazing, and I believe it's probably... I believe the function of your body is everything. What you consume, the sunlight now, it's everything, yeah.
Winning formula.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any closing comments?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Olaf that we had on mitochondrial health, nutrition, and strength training. If you did find this useful, be sure to share it with somebody who you think could benefit, and subscribe for future information and stories from individuals in our community. We really hope that this message on decentralized health gets out to as many people as possible that need it. And it's really quite simple and easy and inexpensive to adopt new practices that can really help make the difference in our life and contribute to longevity. Thanks for now, and let's see you again sometime in the near future.
Thank you for tuning in to the Grassroots Matters podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please feel free to rate, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll come back again for the next episode.